When you've been putting together budget for new CS tech, how do you prove the ROI of that purchase that you're making?
I'll start. So I always focused on, what's the need or the pain point that we're trying to solve with the tech to
Yeah.
then be able to say, okay, what's the goal that we're trying to move the needle on to be able to measure ROI on?
Yeah.
So a lot of tech is going to be on maybe improving efficiencies.
Hmm.
So can you look at what's your ARR per full-time employee ratio, or maybe accounts per CS ratio? Is it, there's more and more data and churn software out there that uh, can impact your bottom line of retention and expansion, so NRR. Um,
Hmm.
and I also lean on the vendors themselves. So, one, what is the thing that I want to track and change? And then two, what is the metrics that the vendor might have to be able to support to say, on average, our customers see X results.
Hmm. Okay, got it. So there's your pain point, there's the vendor metrics, and then you kind of bringing that back to ARR to CSM ratio. Is that right?
Yeah, it depends on the pain point. So I would use
Right.
that as an example KPI for if it's an efficiency gain that I'm trying to improve by purchasing that software.
Yeah, yeah, that's really helpful. Seth, have you leaned on that kind of ratio to CSM as well?
I sure have actually. I think that's a
Yeah.
huge one. So I think Marie nailed it
Hmm.
because the ability to say, hey, we're going to scale our team and delay hiring even, so if you got, hey, we have to budget for headcount, it's huge to be able to say, I don't have to hire another CSM or whatever the role is for 18 months, 12 months, whatever the time frame, really helps the bottom line.
Yeah, yeah. I'm curious now, like I'm going to put you on the spot. What kind of improvements do you expect? Like, is there an ROI baseline when you're looking at these things?
So that's a great question. I think any improvement is beneficial.
Right.
The bigger you can show, the better. And so I think it comes down to how can we what improvements, back to what Marie was saying, right, about the problem we're solving, how can we
Hmm.
translate those improvements to problems that our team is going to not have to deal with anymore, and then figuring
Hmm.
out the calculation for that. So I mean, when most recently when we got our CS tool, I think it was like we ended up with an improvement of like additional 20 or 30%. So I think that was a really good reference point to be able to say, okay, this enables us to absorb this much additional business as the business grows and be able to say we can delay hiring for those roles.
Wow. Right. So you were able to increase the load on your CSMs by 20 to 30%.
Yep,
And that's a CS platform play as opposed to another piece of tech.
exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can see how that would be sort of like a five times ROI or more, right?
Yeah.
I'm curious, Marie, have you looked at things differently where it isn't an efficiency play? Because I know you work in the scaled world, like me. So, yeah, what 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 other ways have you proven ROI for new CS tech?
Yeah, so I think a good example of this is on investing in video tools.
Yeah.
So video to either build self-service support or course work. I think it also then expands into CS and an efficiency play for ad hoc videos. So I try to multi-thread the use case, and that's another tip to build a budget use case, just because I might have my particular use case in a direct customer play. How else can we maybe use this software elsewhere in the business, or within CS to strengthen the opportunity? Um,
Mm.
and a lot of I don't necessarily have a specific ROI there, but there's or a specific example, but a lot of our, if we can solve an ad hoc training. So right now, maybe your CSMs are delivering trainings one-to-one, and we're then able to replace that training with a video training or a course. You can then supplement and calculate, okay, for every customer who goes through that training, we've saved this equivalent amount of time for our CSMs. And that's especially helpful within the scaled segment where you might actually promote, or that will be the potentially the only option for training for that tier of segment or tier of customers.
Yeah. Okay. So from the digital education standpoint, you're saying that a trained customer is likely to renew or expand at X rate. Is that what I'm hearing?
Oh, I was actually saying you're replacing the CSM's time and money by having self-service, but I also agree with you.
Yeah.
That's another tactic that I've used to say, okay, of customers who then complete, coursework or certification or what have you, how much more likely are they to expand and renew versus a customer who doesn't go through?
Got it.
I
Okay.
think
So
I think
please,
that's
Carl.
important because CIOs and CFOs, they like to save money on the bottom line, but they really like to grow money on the top line. So they're much more excited about revenue metrics than they are about cost savings. They like cost savings, it's good. They're cynical about them though. So for instance, if you said, I want to buy this tech because it's going to save all my CSMs an hour a day, and then you times a blended rate, and you said, we're going to save $1 million a year, CFOs, that used to work. I remember we used to do ROIs that looked like that. CFOs will not accept that now. But if you say, my ratio is going to be different, which is really just a different way of saying the same thing, right?
Yeah.
But then they can actually see a path to that equaling, less hiring, let's say, as you scale up or something like that. And so it's much more compelling to them.
That's such a great point. That's such a great point, Carl. That definitely there has been a change in how to present to your CFO, and agree. It's like it's the same outcome, right? But it's just a different way of sharing it, more revenue driven way of sharing it. This is great. Okay, we're like question number one, and I already feel like we're lifting the veil and going behind the scenes here. So this is exactly the kind of discussion that I know our community is going to find valuable. Curious. Um, this is a bit of a spicy question. So when you have been working with vendors, Seth and Marie, like to what level do you align with their own projections versus make your own?
Meaning leverage their calculations for how to figure
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah.
I think you do that when you lack the expertise in a particular area, like how they because if they have a lot of data of how other accounts like that use their platform have been able to do it, that's going to be so much more proven than any sort of calculation you come up with. And it's really helpful to be able to reference that when you're doing it. So, but then if it's something more internal for you, then you can use your own calculation on it. That's kind of been my experience.
Yeah. I think I found some calculations to be pretty accurate. It's just a matter of the timing of when you're going to realize that full ROI.
Right.
So I did this recently with a vendor a video vendor that automates it basically tracks click-throughs. So if your product goes out of date, it recreates the video. So it's replacing the need to recreate videos when they go out of date, which obviously is a huge savings. But the calculation that they were using was based off of how many videos we currently have today. We're not currently recreating all of our videos. So it's almost an opportunity gain, and we're probably not going to recreate all of those videos in the next year, even if we purchase the software. So eventually we'll realize that full ROI, but not necessarily within the first year.
Right. That's a great point. I'm excited to learn about. Are you going to share? You're going to tell us who the video vendor is?
It's called Videate.
Okay, Videate. I have to check them out. They sound cool. Awesome. All right. Let's double click into what you said, Marie, about multi-threading, and I'm curious how you've been able to successfully multi-thread use cases with other teams when you're bringing on tech for your CS team.
I think this also points to a few different topics. So one is, I might have as a business leader, I might have my roadmap within Scaled CS.
Mhm.
So one, I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing aligns with the business as well. So the overarching business goals. So perhaps, my next best thing would be to build out certification, but is that aligned with, the top line business goals? If top line business goals are, we want to excel and get recognition in the enterprise, then yeah, I could make that argument. But if it's not, then I'm probably not going to pursue that goal as hard.
Mhm.
The second piece of that is to, when I evaluate my goal, maybe I check the box, it's aligned with business goals. The second box I would look at is what tools do we currently have in our tech stack, or what desires do we have within the business? So this recently happened. Again, I keep bringing up video, but like video for different use cases.
Yeah.
But this recently came up with video where we have multiple teams using free video tools, and I actually worked with our IT department to discover, what tools they were seeing. They have vested interest to get an official tool because they want unofficial tools to not be used. So I already have some buy-in from the IT team. And then looking, that also helped me understand, okay, which of these other teams? So we have engineering using video for internal collaboration. We have onboarding and CS using it with their customers for, direct communication. We
Mhm.
have support using it for troubleshooting. So we have sales using it for, prospecting. And I can then go to each of those teams and understand, what are your needs within video, and create a really compelling use case, and also find the best long-term solution. So if I can choose, collectively we can choose a tool together, we can get budget, it's shared budget, and that tool will probably be the right tool for years to come because we all work together on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
By the
love
way,
that.
it'll be easier to keep it too, because
Right.
Mhm.
something is perceived as a point tool for one group, then when the CFO is looking for cost savings, it sort of has a bullseye on it, right? Whereas if it's like, no, 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 this is used by 5 different departments, you can't just pull this out. It makes it stickier. Um,
Mhm.
by the way, this is a little off track, but I just have to throw out this observation because it just occurred to me. We're talking about multi-threading. This is all sales, right?
Yeah,
Internal
exactly.
sales, but everything we're talking about are the same things. When I go to sales kickoff and I listen to them talk about sales methodology, it's all the same stuff. So I'll make the suggestion that if you're trying to figure out how to sell something internally, try something like going to ChatGPT and saying, tell me what are the standard techniques of sales, right? And
Mhm.
it'll tell you things like multi-threading. Can you talk to multiple stakeholders instead of just one? It'll talk about talking at different levels, right? Make sure you have executive support and support up through the chain, right? It'll give you all of these hints, and it's all just sales. It's just internal instead of external, but it's the same stuff.
That is such a great
Wow.
observation. Let's talk about ChatGPT some more. I know that's like that's a big one to overcome right now, I feel, because we were talking about this before the session, right? When we were, planning what we were going to share. And you had mentioned, Carl, how ultimately a lot of our investments now are being judged against um, using something like, open AI to do a certain task.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are getting a lot of pressure because executives are hearing all the hype about AI,
Hmm.
and they come to us and say, "Okay, where's all my magical AI stuff? How are you going to use AI to improve efficiency and improve our business?" And ChatGPT, as just going to ChatGPT is great, and there you can do some really useful things. Like you can say, "Be a thought partner with me as I figure out how to sell this internally." It's great.
Hmm.
Day-to-day operational stuff, it's very awkward, right? Having a ChatGPT license, I mean, what are you gonna do? Keep copying and pasting stuff in and back and forth, and then you have to
Right.
worry about is it safe and who's allowed to see this and all that. And so what I'm saying to a lot of my vendors is, I want to consume my AI through you, right? I don't want to go build my own thing, right? If the
Hmm.
accounting department needs to make use of AI, I want it to be inside their ERP, right? I want my
Right.
ERP vendor to bring it to the table, right? I don't want to go have to build stuff. And so, but I think you can use that to your advantage, right? Because you're probably under some pressure to show what are you doing with AI.
Mm.
Frankly, if your vendor kind of brings that along for free, right? Like, hey, well, I'm going to buy this tech, but by the way, it's also my AI strategy is I'm going to buy tech that gives me that out of the box, right? Rather than having to go build something, then you're kind of getting an extra, you're getting an extra bit of value or ROI to it because you're also have an AI strategy. And the thing is that AI without context, and without sort of data control, is just not as useful. So,
Hmm.
when your CS tool brings you an AI feature right built into it, it knows, it understands the semantics, it understands the context, and it also knows who's allowed to see what.
Right.
So it solves a lot of problems for you to get it through your technology rather than trying to build it yourself.
I think you're spot on, Carl. One of the things that we've been doing is to bring back to the sales point is bringing in a tool to enable our sales teams to be more effective on sales calls to kind of alleviate some of the load of
Hmm.
documenting takeaways and then sharing that broadly within the organization, right? And so having a tool that kind of seamlessly integrates with the call tools you have, your CRM tools like that, gives you a great way to get a low cost solution in the door that you can then say immediately benefit from because it's already embedded into your workflows, and then teams can easily share that. So that's one of the things that we just launched was a call recording tool, and every salesperson that has used it loves it. Like there has just been immediate
Hmm.
uplift in adoption because it solves a pain point. It's like I don't have to record and worry about this. I can focus on selling rather than doing that. And so finding those use cases like that gives you such an easier path where you can really help the company be more effective, make more money, and do that quickly.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm gonna put you on the spot as well, sir. Are you allowed to share what call recording tool it was?
Yes, it's Update AI.
That's the best one for sure. And obviously, I'm an angel investor of Update AI, so I am going to say that. But I didn't know. I didn't know that you just purchased them. So that's awesome. Um, great. Anything to add on the AI side of things, Marie? Has that been a challenge for you in defending budget?
No, it hasn't been a challenge. I think Carl is spot on. The only exception I would make, certain, depending on what size company you are, or I think really the people that are at your team, Gemma and I used to work with some really brilliant hacker guys who were, they were in our support team, but I think they could have been master developers as well. I think they could have done some really cool things with an OpenAI account. But
Yeah,
that's
they
not
are.
always available, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, and I think as well, I work for a public company now, and we have a lot more resources around AI. I think some companies do have an AI team that is there to go and work with other teams and give them that support, but very few companies actually have that resource. And even if it exists, it's still a question of priorities, right? And like who knows if cool recording software that creates emails and updates CRMs and CSPs for you is going to be like high on that priority list. So, um, very interesting. I'm glad we talked about the elephant in the room with AI. I see it as a tremendous opportunity, and I love seeing how a lot of our um, portfolio companies are really adopting AI from the start, and how some of our sponsors like Gainsight are, making a huge step in that direction of bringing AI into the products as well.
Well,
I love that analogy. I love
yeah,
that analogy about the ERP for accounting. That was smart.
yeah. And Seth, you made a really good point too. It's interesting because we're talking a lot about ROI and stuff, but what a lot of these tools do is they actually enable people to have a more human connection, right? If I don't
Hmm.
have to take notes, I can really be focused and present. And that one is harder, right? It's hard to put a price tag on that. But I really think that as AI agents become more and more common, that human touch is actually going to become even more valuable. And
Mhm.
I don't know how long it's going to take us to get the data to prove that, right?
Mhm.
To be able to say, well, when people are more engaged, we have better GRR or something, right? But I got to tell you, my gut certainly says that that's true. And I think that's fair as part of a business case. I think there's things that you can say that these are quantified, but I think there's also things you can say that, look, it's just common sense that
Mhm.
having a better human connection with our customers is going to ultimately drive GRR. That's the bottom line, right? But also, advocacy, right? Everything, right? It's not just retention and growth. It's also having that genuine connection. I mean, where you were just at Pulse, it always amazes me when I go to Pulse how much people love Gainsight. Like, because I go to other conferences and people don't love their accounting systems the way they love Gainsight, right? It's a great situation though when you're a vendor and you can create that kind of relationship with your customers, right? And so
Mhm.
everybody should be trying to do that. And using AI, I think not just to like be efficient, I think you almost have to be careful not to be too efficient, right? Because I mean, in theory, you could build some AI bot that would be a CSM, except that I just don't think it would work. I think it would help. I think it can help the CSM do their job better. Um, but I just don't, I think the whole point of customer success is that human connection.
Ooh, bold. Yes, I like that. I agree. I think relationships are more important in a world that has AI in it, but you need to do both very well, right? The stakes are higher. Um, awesome. Yes, a lot of people love Gainsight, myself included. All right, so let's talk about recovering from a bad experience with your former CS tech stack vendor. Who would like to share some tips on, what to look out for as you're building your case for new budget if you've been burned in the past?
Yeah, I've got just a couple, and then I'd love to hear from other folks. One of the things that I've found is if you're going out there to kind of replace a tool, or you found that tool you have
Hmm.
is working and you're figuring out another solution, is really putting the existing vendor into the mix for the evaluation process. One of
Hmm.
the biggest levers that is in place in B2B SaaS is churn, right? So, and the switching costs involved with that. So, if a vendor thinks you're not going to absorb the cost for switching, then they're not going to be really incentivized to really put their best foot forward. And so if you put them on notice, like, we're ready to absorb the costs, and you're going to have to defend the value that you're bringing to our business, I think you can actually potentially get a much better deal and much better feature set by bringing them through the process that otherwise they wouldn't even know that they were at risk of losing the account. So that's been one way, because that gives you the ability to then make sure that if you go and decide to not use that vendor, that
Hmm.
you have clearly demonstrated why they're not working. And
Right.
then you can then also say, hey, we were actually able to save them and improve this relationship because we took them through the process, and now we're in a better situation with that vendor with the existing platform, and be able to save some money that way as well.
I love that. It also just it feels like the right thing to do. Like we work in CS, we should be nice to our vendors. Love that. Marie, do you have anything to add to
Yeah,
the conversation?
I'd also add, if the vendor is willing to do it, the new vendors run a
Hmm.
POC. I think changing companies, I've been working with different tech in the same vertical. And, at one company, you might hear of another solution that seems really shiny and beautiful. And then you end up using it at the next company. You're like, oh, it's not actually as good as I thought it was going to be. So sometimes you have to pull back the veil. And I think the easiest way to do that is through a POC before you really go into a full investment.
Hmm.
Um, I think another piece of it is, and this is veering off of budgeting, but analyze why it didn't go well. So is it really a feature tool set? Maybe. and are those feature tool set absolutely pivotal, or are they nice to haves? So that can help you
Mhm.
understand if the cost of switching is worth it. But sometimes it's not the tool. Sometimes it's, the tool didn't work because there wasn't proper change management and enablement and enforcement to use the tool. And are you going to run into those same problems if you change to a new tool? Perhaps if you don't have a plan in place. So consider that. And I think also if you have that clearly demonstrated, you'll be able to get budget to replace that new tool much easier.
Yeah, and I think change management is critical, right? Especially the bigger the budget, right? Accounting for that. I'm curious, how do you account for change management costs in your budget, or do you? Maybe that's a better question. Like an example
I
being,
haven't, yeah, it hasn't been included in our budget, but I think it's something that we definitely scope when creating a business case is what
yeah,
is the plan to implement, the plan to enable, at what point are you going to have, initial results to measure, what's the reoccurring cadence of measuring those results, and also for continuous enablement. I think Gemma, I love the term repetitions retention.
mhm,
So especially with new tooling like a CSP, where there's going to be a lot of new processes that come with it.
mhm.
You can't just enable your team once on the tool or the new process built within the tool.
Write it down.
Yep.
Yeah. Um,
It's
uh,
such a good point that I think the thing that sometimes people miss is that with business application software, like the implementation is so important. And,
mhm,
you can have a great experience with a piece of software in one company and a terrible in another, and it's the same software. It's just that the implementation didn't go well for whatever reason. Whether that was the people doing the implementing, the business people who were working with them, whatever, kind of doesn't matter. You just want it to work, right? But I do think that you've got to put a lot of focus on that and, make sure that you have the right level of commitment on both sides, both your team and the implementer, and pay attention to the process, right? Because it's going to make or break the value of the software in a lot of cases.
mhm. Yeah. I mean,
The thing, by the way, I'll say just as from my personal experience is things change, right? And sometimes it's the software itself, and sometimes it is the implementation methodology. When I
mhm,
first got to Gainsight 7 years ago, we were a fairly young company, and we worked hard and we tried, but I'm not sure we were as good at implementing our software as we should have been. And we had some customers who maybe after a couple of years were not so happy, and when we looked at it, it was like we kind of need to re-implement some pieces of this because but the software had changed, but also we'd simply gotten better at implementing. And
mhm.
so that's something to remember if you've had a bad experience in the past. Again, it's not necessarily the technology, um, you know so it's good to take a fresh look.
Yeah, I agree. I think every SaaS company is constantly in need of improving their onboarding and implementation process. Um, I think as well, it's interesting. It's an interesting idea, not one that I've done, but one that I've spoken to some other people about who couldn't make today, and they were including the cost of the admin for the tool as part of the budget approval process, right? So that there wasn't like any question as to what the total level of effort would result in. I think that's especially important for complex CSPs.
Yeah, and by the way, that's a that's a question the CIO will ask, right? So if this comes
Yeah.
across the CIO's desk, you should be ready with the answer to that because we're always nervous about business groups bringing in technology but not really having the right level of support. And then when it blows up, they'll come to me, but I won't have anybody because we didn't budget for anybody, and then it just becomes something we have to absorb. So that's a
Mhm.
really, really good point.
All
I
right.
one other small point about that, which is beware of vendors who say, no, 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 you don't need anybody because it's so easy. I think we've all been around the block enough to know you probably need some support, right?
Yeah, let's talk more about that. Let's talk more about some common pitfalls to avoid.
I think one would be assuming it's going to go smooth and that you
Hmm.
won't need any data or process cleanup internally. You know, there's like, especially if you're carrying data over from another system, whether it's, you know, replacement or just you need to, you know, exchange data, probably going
Hmm.
to be some reevaluation of, are we doing things correctly? Are we doing, you know, is the data formatted in the right way? And that that becomes a bit of a rabbit hole because it ends up being larger than you ever anticipated based on, you
Hmm.
know, process change, all of the strings that are attached to each of these data elements. Well, if I change this, I need to change that system, change this process, and these folks need to become involved, and it becomes a pretty big, you know, ball of string to unravel and figure that whole thing out.
Mm, absolutely. That's such a good point. What other pitfalls do you think people need to be aware of so they can avoid?
I think purchasing software only because of the roadmap. A lot of people say, you know,
Oh,
get excited about the roadmap.
conditional
Um,
features.
yeah, and
Yeah,
yeah, then you might be twiddling your thumbs and a year later wondering where they are.
yeah, that's very true. I also think um, it is really helpful to ensure that you know who you're going to be working with, uh,
Mhm.
like post signature, right? And to not only understand what the process will be like, but you know, is there an opportunity to get to know that team ahead of time?
And kind of
Just
related to that, Gemma, is
yeah,
getting someone who understands your business, right? Because
right.
we
Uh-huh.
can come to a general platform, but we've got very specific needs based on being healthcare or, you know, video or whatever it might be in marketing, right? And so if someone doesn't understand how you have to use a tool internally and what that means for you and your market, they may give you bad advice or they might not understand what advice to give.
It's so true, right? And understanding what your pain points are comes with truly understanding your business. Um, Another spicy question, Marie, Seth, have you got an example that you can share where you've put together your business case, you're feeling really good about it, and it doesn't get approved? Could you talk through what you learned from that experience? If it has happened, maybe it's never happened. I feel like it happens to everyone at least once.
Yeah, it happens to
Yeah, I
everyone.
agree.
Happens to everyone, especially, you know, the last few years with the economy
Yeah,
changing. Um,
yeah,
yeah, I think lessons learned, sometimes it's a timing scenario and things,
yeah.
you know, you did everything that you can. I think a lot of the lessons that I've learned are things that I've shared today, you know, multi-thread, run a MVP to test your hypothesis before you say, I need, you know, this
Right.
shiny tool. Um, you know, connect to the top line business goals, not just your individual department or team's goals. There's a lot of lessons learned there that I think have made it easier and easier to do this. And you're never guaranteed budget, but it's a more
Hmm.
compelling argument.
I think a couple things for
Love
me
that.
were don't let the no stop you. You know, continue to press
Hmm.
and figure out how to craft the solution and proposal so that it does get approved. I can't tell you how many no's I went through before I got our CSP approved. There were so many. And so another one was finding an executive that you can tie to help leverage some of their authority or their, you know, stance in the business. Really valuable because if you try to do it on your own, depending on where you stand in the organization, sometimes it's a lot
Hmm.
easier to just, you know, push that aside and say, well, not right now. But when you get someone who's higher in the organization to also fight with you, it can be much more successful.
And how did you find that person, Seth, that executive sponsor?
Yeah. So for us, it was about kind of just meeting with them, understanding what their challenges were in
Hmm.
accomplishing their goals for the fiscal year that we were in. And so as you meet with folks and kind of understand, okay, here, have them walk you through what they're trying to do, how they plan to get there, and then kind of ask a lot of open-ended questions on, okay, how are you going to do this? How is that going to work? Who's going to do it? You start to uncover ways where you can find within the solution that you're proposing ways to align it to their problems. It might not be your top use case, but if you can find a use case with the solution that meets their need and solves a problem for them, you can get them on board and get them to fight that from their angle, and then ultimately have it solve your problem at the same time. So don't be, afraid to be adaptable to the playing field that you have in front of you, and get it aligned with people and their specific needs instead of just yours.
And I'm curious, was this executive sponsor like a part of a different org?
For me, yes, actually it was. Yeah. So I understood what their problems were, and that was huge. And then actually, before taking it kind of to the decision point, went to each of the other executives that were peers with that person and understood their problems and how it could help solve problems for them, which just, built a wave that was not able to be, kind of pushed aside within the organization of, hey, we really need this solution, and everybody's on board at the, the right level to make sure it gets approved.
Yeah, I can imagine that being incredibly important in a highly regulated industry as well, as you work in health tech, right?
Yep.
There's rather obvious, but I'll say it anyway. Start early, right? You can tell it takes a while. You have to build your allies, build your case. If you're trying to get something budgeted and you do your budgeting in Q4, don't start this in October or something. Start early in the year. Really give yourself time to do this. Otherwise, you'll run out of time and you'll be too late to build all that support and have all those meetings. And so.
Yeah, it's true. I think for people who are joining us and who are trying to make this case right now, feel like they didn't have the time.
Yeah.
The advice would be show the pain point of not doing anything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you make it harder, right? Because now you have to create more urgency. It doesn't mean you can't, but hustle.
Yeah.
Don't take your time because you've got a lot to do and you don't have as much time now. So get on it, and have all those meetings. And like Seth, reach out to lots of different people, right? Because that's how you build the momentum and the solid support that you need to push something through.
Yeah, totally. I think sometimes there's the fear maybe that one can have, thinking oh, if I invite too many people into the conversation and the negotiation, that's just actually going to slow the progress. Do you agree? Do you think that observation exists?
I think that fear is, it's not totally unfounded, but I think in general, the going broader, look, the worst thing that can happen is someone can say, well, I don't really care about this particular thing.
Right.
Well, okay. As long as they're not going to actively oppose you, you know what I mean? Fine, I'll leave you alone.
Yeah.
It was good. But I think most people would appreciate, even if they say, hey, listen, this is not a high priority for me. I think most people would say, I appreciate that you brought me into the process. You gave me the opportunity, you talked to me, and now I have an awareness that this is going on. So I don't know. I don't think there's a downside. Unless it's a highly political environment or something. And, one of those kind of, which that's a different scenario. But I think for the most part, there's no downside to being more transparent, communicating to more people. I think only good things happen from that.
To pick up also, Carl, you mentioned earlier, this is internal selling. And Seth, you pointed out that, you didn't go to these executives and say, hey, I want to bring this new shiny toy to you. Do you like it? You said, what are your pain points? What do you care about? Oh, that's interesting. I think I might have a solution to that. And that is solution selling. So I think it really depends on how you go about it. That's probably going to speed up momentum because you're now bringing a solution to their problems, rather than if you were bringing someone in and saying, hey, I want you to care about this thing, then it might slow things down.
Definitely agree. And to both your points, you don't want somebody to come in the 11th hour and totally torpedo yours, because they come in and say, I totally disagree with this. I don't want it. I think it's the wrong thing for the organization. getting to that point and having someone say something like that is really hard to recover from.